This is Sonia Wagner representing PCA families in one of our recordings that capture lived experience and best practice evidence-based learning that assists kinship, permanent and adoptive parents and carers in supporting young people. PCA Families has a zero tolerance of child abuse. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay respect to elders past and present and express our intention to move together to a place of justice and partnership. Being able to learn from peers and connect with those who may help us is particularly important. Today, we are discussing trauma-informed parenting, the brain, and many other matters with Gregory. Welcome, Gregory. Gregory is a consultant psychologist, experienced entrepreneur, and CEO with a demonstrated history of working in the mental health care industry. He is the founder of the Australian Childhood Trauma Group and a wellbeing app called Ripple, skilled in crisis intervention and clinical supervision with a psychology background. So, did you want to introduce yourself as well, Gregory? Or you...
Well, you've done that so well, Sonia. I don't think I need to say anything more. Although when you said entrepreneur, I thought people would be going, "Oh, what does that mean? Is he got a second Amazon or something?" That I like the idea of that because I wanted to work with children and young people. I wanted to be able to influence what I did and when I did it and how I did it, and it felt like the best thing is to set up my own organisation, and rather than have other people sort of telling me what I had to do. And that's sort of the bottom line. And it grew organically. I started off, it was just me. I was just a consultant psychologist doing work in out of home care sector, and then I kept getting more and more work and do more training and do more of this. And I thought if I'm going to survive long term or even thrive in this work, I needed to bring some other people on board. So I started creating the organisation, and it just grew organically over time.
Beautiful. Well, it's necessary, right? So people are drawn to it for that reason. So
the other thing that happened is the more and more I worked in this field, I realised that we're not really good with children who have had adverse childhood experiences of tracking their progress developmentally and physically and psychologically and spiritually through care. And then once they leave care, and whether they're in permanent care, kinship care or adoptive care families, we're not terribly good at that. And that's why I got into say, well, could we track mental health and wellbeing as people are transitioning through? And you'll hear me talk a bit about that because, when a child goes into a hospital, they've got, for those Monty Python fans out there, the machine that goes ping, nurses go into the patient's room and they look at the machine and they can read the graphs and the numbers and go, okay, this patient's doing relatively okay, or no, they're not, and we need to pay more attention to them.
Yeah.
I'm actually of the belief with children who've had adverse experiences, we need to track where they are developmentally. And if we see they're behind and severely behind, we need to be intervening and do something.
Yes.
If they're not tracking the same as what we would expect with children who haven't had those experiences.
Yes.
And we're not giving them the support.
Yes.
Then something's terribly wrong. And I think we don't at the moment do it well. And as an example, I've said to people before that the most important question you should ask when a child leaves care.
Yes.
Are they better off than when they came into care?
Yes.
And very often people can't tell me that, and that concerns me. And that's my kind of activist commentary at the beginning of your podcast. So I hope I don't offend anyone, but I want people to know where I stand. And
it's about the development, and it's about supporting the development, and that really does resonate for me. Being the receiver of a report one year for a child that got slammed for not being resilient and really not understanding any of the multiple of things that had happened in the background for that child. So
the child got slammed for not being resilient rather than
but the fact was that child was doing a lot of work to actually present themselves at school every single day they turned up. So so that absolutely resonates for me, for sure, that it's actually about where you've come from, not where you are at a point in time necessarily. So
but I'm not hard on carers and caseworkers and so forth, but I am strong in my belief, and I will challenge them to say, in a sense, you need to be thinking each day, is this child better than they were the day before or not? And if not, what is it I'm going to do today to help them progress towards where they need to be? Just like I often liken it, as I've said, to the sort of nursing staff. A carer is a bit like the nursing staff and the intensive care unit of a hospital. The child should never know that that's the case, because there are tricky things you can do, which I'll talk about today. But in a sense, that's the kind of attention you need to pay to the child if you really want to create a therapeutic environment.
Yes. Great. It's good advice. So saying that, I wanted to start off talking about the brain, because it strikes me that parents are given very little information about the brain, and it's fundamental. Yeah, like it's the biggest muscle in our body. You wouldn't buy a car without understanding where the petrol goes and what type of petrol is necessary. Yet we have children and we're raising them, and we don't really understand much about the brain. So can you tell us a little bit about the brain, its components, how it works, what we need to know?
I certainly can. I was going to be a bit cheeky, Sonia, and say, hopefully you're not buying a car with petrol. You're going to buy one that's but I understand.
An electric one, yeah.
I understand the analogy. The thing about the brain, it's so complex. And one of the things that I like to do when if I know my audience, I'm not talking to neurosurgeons, I think to carers and so forth.
Yes.
So I believe that any good training or instruction should focus on audience and say, well, how do I translate theory into practice?
Yes.
Theory is that stuff that happens in research, but it's all very well to have a lot of research and then go, well, what do I do with it? So let me tell you about the brain in a way of putting it into practice. Mm-hmm. In a sense, the brain is made up of two parts. I mean, it's made up of a whole lot of other parts, but generally in the way I'm going to talk to you about it, it's two parts. Mm-hmm. We have the brain, the organ, the brain, which is all the physical stuff, mm-hmm. the neurons and the grey matter and so forth that's in your brain. And you have the mind, and the mind resides in that physical stuff in the brain.
Okay, yeah.
The mind and brain are different. The brain allows the whole body to work. Mm-hmm. The mind is that thing that's a little bit nebulous in some ways, that allows us to think and innovate and create and make sense of the world and to understand feelings and experiences and so forth. Mm-hmm. And what we're really trying to do when we're working with children with adverse experiences, apart from developing the body and their organs, which again we'll talk about, we want to develop their mind, because it's their mind that's going to determine their kind of long-term outcomes. How mm-hmm. they use their mind will determine their long-term outcomes. Mm-hmm. And the way that I'll explain this is this. I ask the question, does where a child has come from have to be who they become? And most people say, no. And I say, well, actually, the answer is yes, mm-hmm. unless you help them to develop their mind so that those adverse experiences become just a part of their history mm-hmm. and not all of who they are. Because if their history is all of who they are, then I can tell you where they're going to end up. Mm-hmm. We see it overrepresented in homelessness, mental health facilities, domestic violence, drug and alcohol misuse, youth justice, etc. Mm-hmm. And that's because we fail to help them develop their minds and not have their histories dictate where they become.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that's really important for us to understand.
Yeah.
And thinking about Sonia, you'll find that when we have this, I rant on and go on and on and
Great.
on. And you'll have to put your hand up and say, hold on, I've got something to say.
No, that's good. That's where we get more content. So
what I wanted to say, because you asked about the brain, is that in the physical part of the brain, mm-hmm. it develops from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. This is the last part of the brain to develop, which we call the sort of executive function part, or neocortex, mm-hmm. or as what I say is the thinking mind. Mm-hmm. The parts of the brain lower down I call the reptilian brain.
Yes.
The sort of survival brain.
Yes.
And it makes sense it develops from here up, because
yes.
when a baby's in a womb, it's not sitting in there asking existential questions of itself. Why am I inside a womb? And this is all very interesting. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need that to survive. What it needs is to be able to have its heart beating. Mm-hmm. It has to be able to take through the umbilical cord the nutrients that are coming from its mother and process all that. So it really wants the stem of the brain to start forming, because that's what controls that stuff.
Yes.
When it comes out into the world, we go a bit higher up, because the baby needs to go, oh, this is all a bit scary. I was inside this womb and it was all nice and comfortable. I didn't have to do much. Now, all of a sudden, I've got all the stimulus going on, and I'm trying to work out what to do. And therefore, the brain kind of says, well, this is now about survival.
Okay.
And how does a baby demonstrate that it needs something? Yeah.
Yeah.
A good parent or carer will go, okay, that's about the baby needs a nappy change. The baby needs food. The baby needs soothing. The baby needs to go to sleep. And as we know, cries mean different things. And of course, very often parents, particularly, and mothers, biological or non-biological mothers, are the ones who pick up on that much more easily. We blokes take a bit longer to work all that out. We just hear crying and go, oh, what am I going to do? But we do later on sort of work it out and see there's, cries mean different things.
Yes.
That's the way the baby says, I need something. Now, that process continues actually right throughout our lives, but we get more sophisticated, letting the world know that we have something that we need. We can say, hey, I'm really hungry. I think I might go and cook something. I can recognize some feelings, but baby can't do that. Now, interesting enough, children with adverse experiences, and when I was talking about development before,
yes,
as they grow, when this child is in a stressful situation, I want to talk about stress later, but when they're in a stressful situation, how they manage that stressful situation will be an indicator of where they are developmentally. So, for instance, if a 5-year-old is in a wee bit of a stress, not overwhelmed, but a little bit of a stressful situation, and they start crying like an infant,
yes,
probably telling me their sort of adaptive skills are still infantile.
yes,
They haven't managed to get further up. And sometimes this can happen with adults. You can have a 40-year-old who gets under stress and breaks down because they haven't developed the skill set to manage stress in a much more adaptive and a developmentally appropriate way. So I think as carers, we have to keep this in mind, that part of our work is to say, when we're assessing in the moment of where the child is, when they're under stress, how are they responding to it? So expect when a baby's under stress, they'll cry. That's absolutely appropriate. Even a toddler from time to time will do that. We also expect a toddler to start, once they've got some access to language, maybe rather than just to cry, to say food or or mum or dad or something like that. So we know they need something, and hopefully we respond. So the brain is allowing us, first in a very reptilian way, just, I need something.
Yes.
As we start to develop higher up in the brain and we start to use our mind and we start to have conscious thought.
Yes.
And somebody's helping us to learn some skills and responding when I say hungry. Goes, sure, sweetie, let's cut up an apple and we can sit here together and we'll have an apple, and that'll be a bit of connecting time and some fun. And the brain goes, oh, that's nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
Of course, we know with children who've had adverse experiences, often that's what they miss out on the early time, because they go, yeah. Yes. And nobody responds, and there's no parent to feed them. There's nobody saying you need to change nappy or anything like that. And the brain starts to go, what's the point of crying? Because nobody comes to your attention.
Yes.
So they try and find other ways, but sometimes they just give up.
Yes.
And there was an example about, was it 15 years ago, maybe? There's a story broke, you might remember it, Sonia, the Romanian orphans.
Yes.
Who were found an orphan in Romania, and they found these little, some kids up to the age of 8, 9, 10, they were just sitting in these cribs, and they were doing this because they had given up on reaching out. So they were trying to self-soothe.
Yes.
And that's why if we don't meet the needs of these kids that have had adverse experiences, they'll try and find their own way to resolve it, but often because they haven't got the skill set.
Yes.
They do it in ways that might be problematic.
Yes. So the mind, is that really just their own self-talk that they need to kind of redirect or rearrange?
Yeah, good question. I mean, sometimes it is, and behavioural place, although I studied cognitive behavioural therapy. I'm much more up the analytic end now. So I do have a belief in sort of unconscious processes.
Okay.
Things we can't access, thoughts and meanings and motivations we can't really get a conscious access to. So people will often talk about willpower, even with children. You have a choice. Or if a child who has been terribly harmed, sexual, physical, emotional abuse, neglect, been torn away from their biological parents without knowing why, choice is an interesting thing. And often I don't talk about choice, because if you haven't had something, how do you make a choice that might be good for you or good for somebody else? Particularly if you're in survival mode rather than thriving mode. And those things are different. As you get older, you want to thrive, not just survive. Just survive is just getting enough. People on the street who are homeless, they might just be surviving. But I want people to thrive. I want people to continue to grow and to experience the great things we can have in life if we have the skill set. So what I'm saying about the mind is, when we're trying to create some change, it's not as simple as telling a child what they should be doing. With the idea that all of a sudden they go, oh, thanks so much for telling. Of course I won't. My sister, that's a terrible thing for me to do. Because what their brain is, if it's down here lower than being up here, is going, there's one apple and my sister's trying to get that damn apple. Well, I'm going to get it before her.
Oh, the apple.
To survive.
So we often talk about the importance of felt safety to help sort of elevate from that reptilian brain upwards, I guess. So, I guess these children are often being removed from their caregivers, and that impacts on their felt safety. So I guess at the moment we've also got the pandemic, and we're seeing growing mental health issues like eating disorders and self-harming, and removal from school because self-regulation is difficult as well. So what are some things that carers can do, and whether it's about contributing to that felt safety or whether it's about other things? So
great question. A couple of things I'd say. The first thing I want to just say about generally about behaviour when kids are acting out or acting in, I believe that we, unfortunately, when it comes to behaviour, we're a bit simplistic when we think, a bit simplistic when we think about it. We have this dichotomy, and we see this out in generally in society too. When we look at children, and in fact even adults, we go define behaviour as good or bad. And I think we do it because it's easy. And good behaviour we reward, and bad behaviour we punish, and it makes it very simple. You're not doing what I expect you to do, bad. You are doing it, oh, lovely. Now I say to people, and particularly to carers, I say, I want you to forget about that dichotomy. There is no good or bad behaviour. And they sort of look at me and go, what? No good behaviour? There's got to be no good, no bad. I don't want you to look at behaviour like that anymore. I want you to look at behaviour as communication style. So if a child feels good about who they are inside, and they're what I call their internal working model, which is sort of like a vase, it collects all their sense of self, their self-esteem, their self-efficacy, the way they see the world. Is the world of value? It gives me stuff and I give it back stuff. If their vase is full and they feel good about who they are, then they'll go into say, walk into school in the classroom, and they'll be smiling. And then, teacher goes, good morning, Gregory. And I go, good morning, miss. Good morning, sir. How was your day? And and I'm going to learn today. Fantastic. I'm open to learning. But if a child doesn't feel good about themselves inside, it's unlikely that they're going to walk into that classroom going, hi, everybody, great to be here today. Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to learning. They're going to walk into that classroom going, who's going to pick on me today? Who do I need to get before they get me? That teacher, we're doing maths and I'm hopeless at maths, and that teacher's going to ask me a question and I won't know the answer. I'm going to feel a lot of shame, and I don't want to experience shame. So what do I do? Maybe if I disrupt the classroom early, they'll kick me out, tell me to go to the principal's office, and I go, got out of that. And so people need to understand. So So when kids are acting or communicating in ways that indicate distress or stress, we need to respond to help them to lower that stress level. And that doesn't mean, that includes eating disorders, self-harming, disruptive behavior, kids who might be internalizers who withdraw and go quiet.
Yes.
They are all telling us something. And it's
Yes.
our job as the big people to say, what are you telling me?
Yeah.
Now, if they could say, instead of cutting, if they could say, I'm just overwhelmed with what's happening and I need some release, we'd be able to go, yeah, sure, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
But they cut. And then people say, don't cut.
Yeah.
And they try and stop them cutting. But the problem is, if you stop them cutting and you haven't helped them develop a skill to get relief, as an example, if that's what the cutting is about for that person,
yes,
then they've got no way of getting relief.
Yes.
So
yes.
I always say, before you do that, understand what they're communicating.
Yes.
Help the child to develop another way of getting relief. And it might be bouncing up and down on a trampoline. It might be bouncing a ball on a wall, or going for a walk or run, or whatever it happens to be, or doing yoga or Tai Chi or breathing. Then start working on removal of the behavior that's not terribly helpful for that child, because they're going to damage their skin.
Yes.
So
Yes.
end up with all sorts of scars, and then they'll experience shame and cover it up and don't want to show anybody and so forth.
Yeah. I think it's it's really important to obviously see that as communication, and to lean in with nurture. But I think sometimes as carers and parents, we just feel at a loss maybe to know how to do that. So, if a child is self-cutting, we want them to stop, but how do you lean in to sort of understand what's underlying it, or how do you help them unpack it? Often they can't even harness kind of why they're doing what they're doing, in a conversation, I guess. So
I'll tell you why that happens, Sonia, and I really like the term lean in that you're talking about. If you think about wind, if you have to walk through something difficult, challenging, like a big wind coming at you,
yes,
if you lean back from it, you're going to get blown over.
Yes.
If you lean into it, there's more chance you'll walk through it and get to the other side.
Yes.
So I think this is the first important thing, is lean in. The other thing carers need to understand is you don't want to be controlling of the situation. You want to be in control of your own internal state.
Yes.
So what I notice about people who want to be controlling, it tells me that their internal state is probably somewhat anxious.
Yes.
So they're anxious to do, solve problem, solve problem, solve problem.
Yes.
Now, there really is only one time that we should act almost from our own reptilian brains, and that is life and death.
Yes.
Now, the times we're really faced with life and death with a child are very, very, very small. A kid runs out on the road. Of course, I'm not going to step back and a big Mack truck's coming, and I'm not going to step back and go, oh, I better take some deep breaths and calm myself down, and then I'll step out and pull the child away from the truck. It'll be too late.
Yes.
I just react. You see, the problem is very often what happens, all children's behavior, particularly those that a carer or a worker has deemed bad or inappropriate, suddenly becomes life and death stuff, and everyone's just operating on life and death. Stop doing that. Oh, you're bleeding. Oh, quick, we've got to cover it up. We've got to quickly. And what happens is the child's need is not then met because you haven't first tried to understand the child's need. Now, Dr. Miriam Rose Ungamar, who, just a shout out to her because she was Australian of the Year.
Oh, wow.
Miriam Rose created the Miriam Rose Foundation. She knew something about this, and Aboriginal people have known about this for thousands of years, and a thing called Dadirri. Now, I've heard Miriam pronounce it Dadirri, so that's the way I'm pronouncing it. But when you look at the spelling, some people think, oh, it's got double R-I in it. Is it Dadirri? But it's apparently pronounced Dadirri. And what this is about, there's a great video on, if you go to Miriam Rose Foundation's website, there's a video, beautiful video, and Miriam's talking about this thing. Okay. And it's about a quiet inner listening and spiritual awareness, awakening. And there are 4 steps that I've taken out of the video that I think carers have to get into the space. Yes. To be able to work with children. So the first one, it might sound simple, but breathe. Yes. Now, interesting about breathing is people say, well, listen, when I excuse me, when I got agitated and I was yelling at that child, I was breathing, but unfortunately it's the wrong sort of breathing.
Yes.
Your breathing like that activates your fight and flight system.
Yes.
And polyvagal theory, you would have heard of Stephen Podges, talks about what happens when all that gets activated. It's not helpful because as you become more stressed and you don't have anything to manage that, when you breathe, you're saying to your brain, there's something going on here that I don't want you to use your mind to think about. I just want you to use the reptilian part of your brain to do something.
Yes.
And of course, it's a bit like in an elevator going downstairs. Suddenly your mind goes, bleh,
yes,
because the brain thinks this is life and death, and you just have to act.
Yes.
So breathing, if you can be in control of your breathing, you're actually giving a message to this reptilian brain that you are actually in control
Yes.
of yourself, and this is not life and death. Whatever's going on out there,
Yes.
is not life and death, and therefore your mind engages rather than the reptilian brain. You can say, well, what's the best thing for me to do now? So breathing is critically important. So that's the first part of this. The second part is listening. Now people think listening is really about, what can I hear out there? Am I listening to Sonia? But another important part, and that's important, another important part of listening is what's happening internally in you. What are all the noises and things going on that might get in the way of you being able to stay in the front part of your mind? Now, as an example, here we are on this live podcast between us. We're having to have this conversation.
Yes.
And I'm listening to you and I'm trying, if I got caught and I listen in myself, I'm looking for little things of anxiety, or have I said something that sounds stupid? Is someone going to laugh at me? And if we allow all that noise to get in the way, I'd be a blubbering mess here talking. He's meant to be an expert in this area, boy.
Yes.
So if we can stay in our minds, the mind is so powerful to help us to be able to do this. So listening is listening inside and listening outside and bringing those things together. Because if I can do this breathing and I can listen to what's going on and I'm in control,
yes,
it's going to enable me to do the third part, which is to connect.
Yes.
A child who is telling me they're distressed is seeking connection.
Yes.
And if you say to a child, and I say this to parents with just kids who haven't come through a care system or been adopted or anything like that, if a child is lying on the ground crying and throwing a tantrum, and you say to them, go to your room and come out when you've calmed down, you know what you're saying to that child is, when you are distressed, I don't want to know you.
Yes.
I don't even want to help you. I want you to go into your room and calm down. Now, the poor little 4 or 5-year-old, I think the parent's fantasy is the 4 or 5-year-old's going to go into their room, slam the door and be sort of going like this, and then suddenly go, I've been sent into my room to contemplate what I have done. I need to give this some serious thought and calm myself down, and then come out and say, hello, mummy, daddy.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. It was really inappropriate of me to hit my little brother.
Yes.
It doesn't happen.
No.
See, the child who's distressed needs you to stay present, but also to be in control.
Yes. Yes.
And if you're in control, that energy, because there's an energy, Freud talked about transference, and other psychologists and mental health talk about projection. Talk about energy. We give off energy. And people understand this. You walk into a room and you think, no one said anything, but you think you can cut the air with a knife, and you go, oh, what's happened here? It's because we give stuff off.
Yes. Yes.
And if you're giving off to that child, I'm out of control. You need help, you're out of control. So am I.
Yes.
The child's going, there's no captain of the ship or driver of the school bus.
Yes.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So if I can be in control, breathing, so I've breathed, I've listened. What's going on? What's the child communicating to me? What might get in the way of me being able to hear that? I know that I need to connect with the child. Now, there are different ways to connect. It doesn't mean use your words. And sometimes when a kid is having a tantrum, using your words is not the best thing. People say, well, what do I do? Well, I actually talk about, you create what I call 2 contact circles distance plus a half. Now, a contact circle, if you put your arm out like this, that's 1 contact circle. Do that twice. And the reason for this is, and then take a step, it's creating safety for you and for the child, because the child's going out, limbs are going forward. You don't want to have the child hitting you. And people say, oh, just said to me, create 2 contact circles plus half a step. Half a step is because the leg is longer than the arm. That's why you want to do that.
Yeah.
And then if you can, depending on the age of the child, you want to see if you can lower yourself a bit, because if you're dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum who's 3 or 4, and you're 6'1", standing up there and the child's down there, it creates sort of an imposing presence. And again, the energy given off, and the survival brain of the kids going, look at that big monster standing there. Yes. So I say, if you can get down if the kid's on the ground doing this, 2.5 contact circles, get down on the ground yourself, but only get down on the ground if you can get back up again. Because there are some people who get down and say, Gregory, I got down and I couldn't get back up again. If you happen to be of the sort who's not terribly physically fit, you can't get down, just get a chair and lower yourself into the chair.
Yes.
And then breathe and be quiet. Breathe and listen.
Yeah.
What often will happen with little kids, they'll sort of get, what are you doing? That will be the first time you speak and you say, I'm breathing. He goes, what are you doing that for? Well, actually, I've heard that if I can be in control of my breathing, just like this, it helps me to feel more settled. Maybe we could do it together. But then I just keep breathing. I don't respond. Don't say that. Yes. Keep breathing. Yeah. Because sometimes the brain of kids with adverse experience are looking at the carer going, what happens if I say this? Can I push one of your buttons?
Yeah.
So I'm
very
going,
true.
What are you going to do?
Very true.
Breathe.
Yeah. It is. It's being in control of yourself, isn't it? So
absolutely.
I always wanted to be that parent that had a child that had the major tantrum in the supermarket, so I could get down on the floor with them and thrash it out with them, but it never happened for me. So so I can definitely understand that concept of just kind of.
You mentioned thrashing out. I just want to challenge it. We don't want to thrash it out with them.
Yeah, not thrash it out.
We'd be both doing stuff. What we want to do is to role model what we want from them.
Okay. Yes.
And then over time, they will come towards us. And what I've noticed, and you can see this, when a child, even adolescents, when they go off, they will gravitate towards the safest person in the room.
Yes.
The safest person in the room will be quiet and breathing.
Yes.
And it's giving off, I'm in control.
Okay. Yes.
And I've seen it time and time again.
Can we talk about a couple more specific examples, if that's okay? Because it's good advice, but knowing how to apply it's really important. So if we've got a sister hitting a brother and pointing out his faults daily, how do we? What's the right response? What do we do?
There's a couple of things. We're gonna, of course, nobody likes violence, and we've got to ensure violence doesn't happen. We've got to be careful about, again, this controlling thing, because sometimes as parents, when kids are fighting, we get in there and we tear them apart and say, stop doing that, and you hit your brother, go to your room. What we missed is the brother, 5 or 10 minutes ago, and going, you're a fatty, stir.
True, I've seen that play out before.
And the kid who's been sent to the room is trying to say, but he went, and you should be quiet, go to your room. So I think, and I do have a little model around this, we do have to make sure, and we want to do this when kids are quiet and silent. So with all children, and this is true for your own children biologically, but also particularly for kids in permanent kinship care, adoptive kids, we need to teach them about expectations when they're in the front part of their mind. You don't teach people about expectations when they're in their reptilian brain. They won't hear it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
When a kid's hitting and screaming, go away, I hate you, there's no point going out. Now, please, we've talked about this. Our expectation is there's no violence in this household because they're not in the right part of their brain.
Yes.
So we have to do lots of preventative and proactive work. And that's why I say when a child first comes into our care, we should be doing, and workers should be helping us do this. And if they don't, they're failing us terribly as carers. And then carers might just have to say, I've got to do it myself. We do over the first couple of weeks an assessment against developmental milestones. What do I expect of a child of this age at this time? Just a child who hasn't had these experiences. And I go, here are certain things, key milestones.
Yes.
Is this child meeting them or not? If they're not, okay, I now know the things I need to work on. Now, one of them might be emotional literacy. I don't work on emotional literacy when a kid's yelling and screaming. I work with them about feelings and development of feelings when they're at rest. I might get storybooks. You can get it. In fact, there's a group of storybooks when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling loud, all those kind of things.
Yes, I've used them
out these days where at bedtime you go, we don't need to read about Winnie the Pooh. We can read about feelings, and kids get into it. They like it. We're reading, we're connecting. Let's learn as we go. And that's why I said before about nursing staff and intensive care unit of hospital. The kid doesn't need to know you're actually teaching them something.
Yes.
They're having fun doing it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we do that and we do that and we keep doing the lesson and doing the lesson until we get evidence. Now, if the kid, say we're doing those lessons and the kid goes, we have to decide, is this life and death? Is the little kid actually going to get hurt? We might need to first separate people. There's two ways about it. We've got to make sure people are protected. But then our next goal is to get everybody back into their thinking minds. Before you decide to send them to their room, no supper tonight, no, give them consequences and all that kind of stuff. Just an aside, I've heard over the years, very often people talk about consequences and what they really mean is punishment. The child needs consequences. What they're really saying is the child needs to feel pain. So here's the thing. I often say to carers, look, these kids have already had consequences in their life. They've been removed from their biological family. They've felt terrible pain and abuse and so forth. So, going down that track is not helpful. What they need is teaching and learning and empathy and understanding. And if a child is not developing on those milestones, then we have to go back and say, well, what else do we need to do?
Yes.
Not they should be. Well, they're not, it's not happening. So clearly we're not doing enough. Do I need more outside support? Do they need to go and see an art therapist or a play therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or OT, occupational therapist, speech therapist to help them with some of those developmental issues? And we have to look at it like that. The unfortunate thing is I think sometimes what happens is as carers and even workers, we're so anxious for these children to sort of do better, to shift and change, that we sometimes, I think, put such huge burdens upon them rather than understanding. And this is the fourth one from connection with Miriam. Change takes time.
Yes.
And I add this
sometimes years, right? So
change takes time. You cannot hurry the river.
Okay. Yeah. It's a good analogy. Yeah.
And I think if we can get carers to think about this, and it's great. They have to say, well, what are developmental issues? And they might decide what are the most important ones at the moment. They might need some help with that. How do we work on this? Physically, psychologically. So physically is the body. How do we strengthen the body around this developmental stage? Psychologically, which is both cognitions and emotions. How do we strengthen the mind? And strengthening the mind can also be about strengthening the brain, but the brain strengthening really comes from the physiological stuff that we can do.
Yes. And
spiritually, and I don't mean by spiritually, I'm not talking about faith, but for some people that might be important, and for some kids, access to faith might be good for them. But when I talk about spirituality, I'm really talking about learning connectedness, becoming connected and reliant on something greater than yourself, which really means adults, your carer, parents, older brothers and sisters, friends, neighbours, the community of your school, etc.
Yeah.
Kids need to learn to trust that in the scheme of things, there'll be more adults than fewer who will do the right thing by you.
Yes. Yeah.
And to learn that, they do need to find adults.
Yes.
In fact, are going to do the right thing by them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, I keep
saying. Sorry to cut you off. So in that
Right.
situation with the sister hitting the brother and pointing out his faults, you know, I guess you're wanting to bring them two together to create connection.
Well, maybe at some point, but the first thing you want to do is get kids back into their thinking mind.
Yeah.
And then if I know I've got them in the thinking mind, then I might then bring them together and say, hey, listen, let's have a little think about what this might have been about. Now, if as soon as you ask that question, they go back to, it says fun, and they go, okay, let's go for a walk. Because what's happened is they haven't stabilized in their mind yet. They're still in that agitated state. You've got to be completely out of that agitated state.
Yeah.
It's all right to say, well, he poked his tongue out at me. Okay. So what was the feeling you felt when he poked his tongue out at you? I was really angry. Sure enough too. Little boy, John.
Yeah.
Knows my age, John. You know, not many Johns name. John, how come you poked your tongue out at? Says, well, she won the game and wasn't fair. Was she cheating? No. Oh. When she won the game, you actually felt a bit embarrassed or maybe a bit shamed in some way. And even if the kid doesn't understand those words, they will get a sense in the way that you speak to them. They will get a sense in their body of what that means.
Yes. Yeah.
So losing doesn't feel very good, does it? No. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you start to begin having those sorts of conversations to connect feelings, then you will create change and you create new neurological connections in the brain. And that's what we're trying to do, develop the mind and develop the organ that's the physical brain. And you have to do this again and again and again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And again and again and again.
Yeah, get it. And so I guess when I think about that, I think I would be looking for other opportunities as well. I would, you know, the sister's hitting the brother and pointing out his faults. I'd be looking to go, you know, actually, what are the really positive characteristics about him that I kind of start to bring into other general kind of conversations? Oh, did you see, you know, John did this amazing picture of you holding a dog today or whatever. So I'd be finding other opportunities to talk up John to the sister. Is that an appropriate strategy?
Well, yes and no. I'll tell you why. Because you're assuming that the sister is going to be able to hold you glorifying the brother.
Okay. Yes.
And so you're trying to talk up the brother, and the sister's going, does that mean you love him more than you love me? Oh, now he really is a threat.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
So you might be wanting to talk up the brother in your own space with the brother alone.
Okay. Yes.
It's what I call a credit in the vase. I saw you on your bike today and you were doing so well to steady yourself.
Yes.
That was tremendous.
Yes.
Credit in the vase.
Okay.
With the sister, we might want to do the same thing separately. So we say, and I might be wanting to look out for moments where she did the right thing with the brother. I noticed how helped Johnny get his food this morning. That was so good of you.
Yes.
Really appreciate that.
Yes.
Credit in the vase.
Yeah.
And so then you start again over time to create the circumstances where these kids are not threatened by each other because they're getting what they need from the adults around them. Because sometimes this fighting can be about the adults aren't paying attention to
totally
getting what I need, so I'll go.
Totally.
And of course, it's hard. And for single carers, my heart sometimes aches for them because if they have 2 or 3 kids, it's very hard. Or which one? So I have said, particularly to single carers, but I think this is true for where there's 2 carers. I want you to think about the raising of children like they did many, many years ago, which is you need to create a village around yourself. And that village, and you literally need to go basically and interview people for the role of being part of your village, because it may not be the people already in your village, because they may not understand the stuff. They may be frustrated by the child you have in your care, and maybe they weren't supportive in the first place when this child came into your care. So you need to go looking for the sort of people you need.
Okay.
Help raise this child. Now, some of the people you need might be, can someone come and help me 2 or 3 times a week, clean the house or do the laundry or cook food?
Yes.
One adult can give attention to the child.
Yes.
Now, we have a thing called respite, and I think some kinship carers and family carers may get access to it. I'm not so sure about adoptive carers.
Yes.
Is there a respite system within?
There's respite that they could access, yes.
So this will be possibly a bit controversial, what I'm about to say.
Okay.
The respite system we have in out-of-home care, whether it be foster care, kinship care, and so forth, to me, doesn't bend enough. And what I mean by that is this. When kids grow up and they have their cousins and other people around, generally speaking, it's not, hello, cousins, at 2 o'clock every second week, we can come over to your place. What tends to happen is that you sort of get to know your cousins over time slowly. You know they're part of your family from the beginning. And it might be mum and dad say, hey, Uncle Brian and Auntie Mary are coming over tonight because Dad and I were going out to watch a movie. And they're coming over Wednesday night, spontaneous, bang. But poor carers, sometimes they don't have the flexibility to say, I actually need the support tonight, not in 2 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time or 5. So I say the village has to be a bit like, mirror what happens in real life.
Yes.
Outside.
Yes.
And so just saying you've got respite once a month, for me, doesn't cut it, because if a carer in 2 weeks is so stressed and they haven't got the skill set at that time to manage that stress, another 2 weeks of damage goes to the carer and to the child before they go, oh, thank God for that.
Yeah.
And that's risk. That's the risky time when placements break down. The caregivers.
Yeah. It's a good point. We were talking to someone yesterday that was in a situation they just needed help. Fortunately, they had a very good friend that is a neighbour, and that friend just came in and for 20 minutes was able to help with the child and just give her some breathing space to regroup. And
fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's needed. And I've always said when a child first comes into someone's care, at the very same time, there should be almost like a mirror family.
Yes, to support them.
Who join exactly at the same time. Not in 6 months' time, we'll start talking about respite.
Yes.
This family joins and they begin to raise this child in the village, and they work out what respite will look like for them together.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost like a mentor respite kind of situation. So
because what happens is in 6 months' time, and the carers are, and they say, oh, you're going to respite. What the kid experiences, I can't handle you, and you're going away to these strangers.
Yes.
Whereas if they had joined in the beginning and they came over now and then to your place for dinner and they were introduced, and this, sometimes, and the kid doesn't know that they're part of the intensive care unit of the hospital.
Yes.
Carers don't say, we're your respite. And I've heard this, we're your respite carers. What does that mean? When your mum and dad need a rest from you, you come to us. So the kid goes, oh.
Yeah, it's kind of wrong, isn't it? Now you point
that
out.
Is, we have a meal, we don't mention anything, and we might do this 3, 4, 5 times. And then one night, Uncle Brian and Auntie Mary say, hey, we're going to the circus on Saturday and we'd love to take you.
Yes.
The child's already developed some relationship with those carers, so the chances are their brain's going to be thinking mine, not oh, you're going to hurt me.
Yes.
And then you begin to develop out the relationship.
Yes. And it sounds like that's a natural progression, because that's inviting the other family in for a dinner and a meal together, and like a natural created relationship. So it also, go on.
You shouldn't be talking about all these clinical terms and terminology in front of the child, you know.
Yes.
It's saying, you know, a carer might say, oh, someone says, who's that? Oh, this is my foster child.
Yes.
This is Mary.
Yeah.
This is John.
It's kind of like watching the news in front of a
young child. They have no business knowing one way or the other unless they're such a friend, and then the adults talk together, not in front of the child, about the circumstances. You don't want to make the child seem like, particularly if you've got your own biological child and the child who's adopted, and someone says, oh, this is my son and this is my adopted son.
Yes.
And the adopted son goes, oh, all right. So I'm a little bit different.
Yes, totally. And it gets me onto that secondary traumatization and caring fatigue that are also aspects of caring that aren't always frequently discussed. So when things go wrong in our relationships with our children, or when we experience anxiety, such as a pandemic, it can become really challenging, and things can shift in our cognition and expectations, feelings, etc. So we try and encourage our carers to also think about their own self-care and taking time out, and I guess also celebrating the small wins that happen along the way. But sometimes that time making for yourself seems really kind of whimsical and nonsensical when you've got these real needs that this child has in front of you. So that can be overwhelming, even if it in itself, for you to have to go and kind of create time for yourself. So I guess what I'm wanting to know is, how can that realistically be achieved? Can we as an organisation be doing more to make sure that these carers are getting that kind of self-care,
The
understanding
answer
it?
is absolutely yes. And I think we have to change the way we talk about this with carers, because we all know, you say to a carer, well, you need your own self-care and therefore you should go out. And the carer goes, oh, but what's going on with this kid?
Yes.
I think we need to talk about it. You need to role model healthy behaviours. If you and your partner, or you on your own, goes out and has your own time on a reasonably regular basis and goes to a movie or goes to the gym, does other stuff, and you come back and you talk about those experiences with the child, so role modeling healthy behaviours, because you're saying to the child, everybody needs something to go in. Yes. Whatever that might be. And if the child says, you can't leave me, you don't like me, you don't leave me, no, actually, yes, I'm having some time for myself. And sometimes, sweetie, when you go off to sports or you go to swimming, you're having time for yourself, and that's really good for you. And it's good for me too. And when carers go, I can't do that, you have to say, then you're role modeling something that's not helpful for the child. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's what agencies, workers need to start talking about. Yes. It's not just about your self-care. This is actually about good role modeling. Yes. And then tying back into what you said about having that mentoring family, if you've already got that in place, it does make it easier for you to achieve that. And if you don't, I've said you've got to create a village. It's not going to happen out of thin air, and it's not going to happen unless you put some effort into creating this village. And as workers, as an agency like PCAF, yes, your workers will need to assist carers in hearing this message, but also then saying, well, how do we help to create your village? Yes, for sure. Really, it's a really good idea for us to think about how we support that better. So, so I wanted to ask you, is there anything else we should be talking about that is really important for adoptive kinship or permanent carers or parents, or any new research that we should watch, or any new ideas that are surfacing? Look, part of me wants to go, yes, and we could talk for another 5 6 I'm sure you could. Look, I want to, there's a couple of things. I want to acknowledge that the work is hard. M. Scott Peck, from a book called The Road Less Traveled, which I'd recommend everybody to read. It's an old book now. I agree. I've read it. But his opening line, I don't know, do you remember his opening line in that book? Life is hard. Yeah. And when you can kind of, he doesn't say lean into it, but since you mentioned leaning in, when you can lean into it, it becomes easier. because if you keep trying to escape it.
Yes.
And he was meaning that you can sort of, there are two roads. There's the road less traveled, and there's, I call them the road of the multitude. See, most people don't want to go down the road less traveled. They want to go down the easier road where relationships are superficial, where you're all, everything's happy, we're all Hollywood and so forth.
Yes.
But real life and experience is the road less traveled. And there are a few people there, but your relationships will be stronger. You'll feel pain much more intensely, but you'll also feel joy much more intensely.
Yes.
And if you face the challenges, it becomes easier. You go, well, I can do this. I have resilience. I'm building it as I go. So I think we need to understand there's no way to shortcut this.
Yes.
There's no way to sugarcoat that kids who have been harmed need a therapeutic environment with which to heal. And there is a difference between a therapeutic carer and a carer. And if I use the analogy of, say, there's a therapeutic carer playing with a kid on the basketball court, and there's another carer playing with a kid on the basketball court, and if we looked at them and didn't think it would all look the same. But the difference is the mindset of the therapeutic carer versus the carer. The carer over here is saying, well, I've got to play, get some exercise with the kid, and we'll play ball and so forth. And what am I going to make for dinner tonight? Or where am I going tomorrow? And how long will I have to do this for? And so forth. The therapeutic carer thinking, look, we're playing basketball. But what are some of those developmental milestones that we need to work on? And how could we use basketball to help with that? And it might be gross or fine motor skills. We could do some work with the basketball without their knowing. I also know that this child gets really angry sometimes. So I know what I can do is I'm going to teach them about deep breathing to take better basketball shots. Hey, look, I've heard, Johnny, if you bounce the ball and then take a big deep breath and release it when you take the shot, you'll get a better shot.
Yes.
So Johnny for the next few weeks or months is practicing this and take a few deep ones. And then somewhere down the track, the carer sees the kid goes off, and the carer helps the kid to come down and says, hey, you know what, Johnny, when you get into that space, when we've been playing basketball and we do that deep breathing, now the kid's already learned about deep breathing, and it's now ingrained in his body. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard if you do that when you've got those big feelings coming up and you think they're going to be the boss of you, I heard if you do that deep breathing, those feelings will no longer be the boss of you. You'll be the boss of your big feelings.
Yeah. You're finding those opportune teaching moments without it being a teaching
and
moment.
You have to repeat it.
Yeah.
And repeat it. The thing about research, I do want to say, I try and tell people, look, research is good, but I came up with this phrase, truth is the absence of knowledge. And this is what it means. 500 years ago, people did research and they came up with that the earth was flat. And everyone believed it. Earth is flat. That was their truth. Then somewhere down the track, somebody took a boat and went to the horizon, and it kept going, and someone went, maybe it's not flat, we didn't fall off. I actually think maybe the earth is round, and so the truth changed. So I'm always hesitant, and people keep talking about what is it? Research. Not research, what's the other word? Not research based, help me out here, based. Research based. It's another word when people talk about our program is something based, is
evidence based.
Thank you very much. That's the word I was looking for. In your moment, look, 61, and I was sort of going, oh,
no, me too.
So evidence based, and people think we've seen the research, ours is evidence based. I prefer to talk about evidence informed. And what this says is there is research there, and it might be truth today, but I want my mind to be open that I might gain some more knowledge.
Good point.
And that tomorrow, that research is actually wrong. And we've seen research. You can get research that will tell you anything that you want to believe in. There's research out there that says climate change is not happening.
Yes.
So I'm very cautious about people sort of becoming, today this is the flavor of the month. I want people's minds to be open.
Yes.
Say, well, my truth today is this, but I'm going to keep my mind open because I might do something and discover my truth changes tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point because, when you're working with children, you're leaning in, you're being attuned to what's going on for them. And, you know, I look back now and go, I didn't use the naughty corner because I didn't like the idea of it. I didn't see how staring at a wall taught you anything about what you had done or need to do. So, you know, but I didn't know, it wasn't documented. The research would tell you to use the naughty corner.
That's because you're listening to, what was her name? What was that British woman who
Oh,
did?
yes. Yeah. But for me, it's sort of like, you know, it's, you want a growth mindset. You want to know what you can do, how you move forward. So the things that you've been talking about today about how do you grow and build skills and capabilities and support, and, you know.
And I think what Miriam said about you cannot hurry the river, change takes time. People need to understand not going to change this stuff quickly. It is, it's more of a marathon than a sprint.
Yes.
And you need to train for that marathon yourself.
Yes.
And help the child to run that marathon. So when they get to the end, everyone goes, we did it. Yay.
Yeah, absolutely. So
not go, come on, we've got to do it today, quickly.
No, you got to take time with it. I think that's really great advice. So I want to thank you so much, because I have learned so much today myself. There are things that I'm going to put in place now as a result of what you've said as well. So so thank you so much.
Absolutely welcome, Sonia, and great work you're doing, PCAF, and to the carers out there, and please keep it up, because it means a lot for children and young people who haven't had a great start to life. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. And to anyone that's making the time to listen to this recording today, thank you for giving up your valuable time for the benefit of the young people in your life. If you are a kinship, permanent or adoptive parent needing help or support, please contact PCAF on 90201833. And please subscribe or leave a review or share an idea for a future topic. Until next time, have an amazing week.